You really need to be careful for some of these items that you will run into out there. If you're not careful, it could cost you money. Hey, it's Don. Today we're going to look at just a few items that I picked up, and we're going to discuss a few issues with them. Things you need to be careful with, and not just in these types of items, but in any item made or similar to what we're showing you here. Now, the first item is this statue. Now, this was actually marketed as being made out of bone. That's literally what the tag said on this item. It's clearly, obviously, not bone. It's definitely not ivory or anything else like that. Now, let me show you the label on here. Now, the label on here says it's handcrafted, and it does indeed look like it's got almost like a ring pattern on it, but that's actually cutting marks. This is handcrafted, this is hand carved, but what this is actually made out of is resin. That's all it is simply resin. If you drop that on a table, it makes that little plastic sound that you hear from some of the older celluloid pieces. It's still vintage. It's probably from the 60s. It is hand cut. This is hand carved. I've seen statues like this for, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different things. I've seen them made to look like whalebone, horn, antlers, and things like that as well. Some of this same material they've made pool balls, cue balls, and things like that out of also. You can color this material. The biggest takeaway on this is don't assume because it says handcrafted and it looks like it's actually been hand carved that it's definitely bone, just because someone says that. I see items like this marked all the time as bone. I've even seen them marked as ivory. This is clearly not ivory. It is well designed. It is well done. It will still sell. Now, I paid $2 for it. It's well worth the $2 in my book because the art factor alone is pretty decent. There's some telltale signs that this is made out of resin, and that would be like the marks or places where it's been broken. There's a little piece broken. That would be the bottom of it here. Now, a good way to tell if this is actually resin versus bone, take a red-hot needle and see if it sinks in real quickly, real easily into some inconspicuous place like back here in the bottom area. If the needle goes right in, it's going to be resin or some form of plastic. So just be careful. I've seen people pay $50, $60, $100 for one of these resin statues, and I get people sending me pictures. Hey, what do you think this is worth? I got to tell them that it's just resin and it's probably only worth $15 or $20. $2, it was cool. I wouldn't mind hanging on to it. I love little statuaries and things like this. Now, listing this wise, I'd put it up for $57.50 as a hand-carved resin figure. That's what it looks like. They took a big block of resin and they just cut this out. You can see some marks. You can feel where somebody's actually carved it out in several different spots on here. We cast. It does not appear to be a cast item. So these still sell. They still sell, though, but they're not worth a ton of money. It's not original. Now, there's some other ones like this that look like wood. Anri, A-N-R-I, Swiss or German-made music boxes and wooden items I run into as well that are not wood. It was cheaper to do for the company, so they basically made them out of resin that was colored to look like wood. It has the look, not the feel, though. That's the issue. So be careful with anything you're out there looking at. The handcrafted sticker on anything does not mean that it's a naturally made product. You can handcraft anything. You can handcraft resin, plastic. I could have made this out of pulp, plaster, and it could still be titled as handcrafted. So that's a huge thing that you got to be aware of on things like this. Now here's another interesting piece here. Now it's supposed to look like a surfer. You should know enough to say that chances are this wouldn't be a legit item. This is actually a modern day item. It is made out of wood. The face is hand carved in this piece. Now, the biggest telltale signs on this piece that it's not vintage, it's not original, and it's not really carved like you would assume. Most people would assume this is one solid piece of wood. Now, a big telltale sign on this piece here to distinguish what you have is to look where the joints, where the legs mount to the body. And let's see if we can get in there good enough. If you look very closely, you're going to see 3 round circles. And that is on every joint on this one. I don't know how well you're going to see it in every spot. Maybe you won't be able to see it, but you can see where they've tried to cover it up there. The arms, again, have it up there. You can see the round circles at the top of the arms. Those are nails. This was cut out from basically many different pieces. It was probably cut out in a jigsaw and somebody's just smoothed it out. Jigsaw wise, I say, because all of the pieces are flat except this leg here. And if you lay it in this direction, this leg is basically a flat piece too. So that's the key on this one. This one is not a carved figure, but different pieces that were attached with nails. They're modern nails as well too. Now, if this was a vintage piece, the hair would not be nailed on like I see it on here, nor would the skirt be nailed on. They also wouldn't look like this to be riding on a surfboard. For my dollar investment, it's still something that I could probably get 20, 25 bucks for on a good day. It is a tourist piece. This might have been purchased at, say, Ron John's or one of the Hawaiian companies that's very well known across the globe that sells these types of items. Either way, it's still a decent item to sell, but if you're going to go ahead and list this, you got to be very careful to not mark it as a carved wooden figure because it is multi-piece construction. That looks like there's filler covering up or trying to cover up this. It looks like it has gesso over the outside, which is a layer of like a thick, almost plaster paint. Looks like they've sanded it down and then painted it, repainted it to make it look like wood would be my guess. There's nothing wrong with this. Just don't pay much for it. Again, I got $1 into this. This is one of those items that a lot of people will assume is a full-fledged single-piece carved statue. Now, we run into carved statues. Now, this is a solid piece. This is one solid piece of wood. The value between something that's put together like this and the solid piece is immensely different. This is, I guess, a water buffalo or something along that line. It's made to be a dresser box. Now, it's pretty dirty, unfortunately, but it's got a spot to put something in. So this is a decorative piece set on a table, a nightstand, or, you know, anywhere really on something like this. But this is heavy. This is very heavy. It's very well orchestrated, decent imagery. Everything's here. A lot of these items are not marked. They are not marked. So not seeing a mark in it is not a deciding factor. What I look for are the splits. When the wood's dried out, you can see where it's split along grain lines and things like that. There's quite a few of them on here. That only comes from age on this sort of wood, on these dark, heavy pieces. Lighter ones like this one weighs almost nothing. It's modern wood. It's nothing special. This could even be made out of pine wood. So feeling the weight on something like this should also tell you that it's not a super-duper well-made piece. Weight-wise, very heavy. This is probably 2, 3, 4 pounds even, maybe even a little more than that. This is in the ounce range. Very easy to ship, of course, but lightweight, modern day. Don't get fooled on these pieces. Most of what you run into there out in the wild for stuff like this are going to be tourist pieces, just like this one here. This is probably not a tourist piece because of the design, the construction. If it is a tourist piece, it's from probably 100 years ago or better on pieces like this. You just don't come up with stuff like this very often these days. I don't run into them very often. But I do, as I said, though, run into a ton of these modern-day, put-together pieces that are made to look like they're old hand-carved. The pieces, again, are probably all cut out on a jigsaw other than the face. The face is the only part that was probably all hand-carved. And they probably didn't even all hand-carve it, I would say. They probably just went ahead, cut it out with a saw into the shape they wanted, and then just did the little bit of carving wood on it from there. So anyway, that's something else you 100% need to look out for because there's a huge difference in those. Now, the last item here is this whiskey bottle here. This is probably from the Civil War. Now, I bought this, and you can see it in a video, me actually finding this exact bottle from our trip during Christmas time there. Big factor on this one is, though, I went to an antique mall and purchased this. At antique malls, most of the time, if it's a big antique mall, they have little bins up at the front where you can put stuff so you don't have to walk around the mall. They don't have shopping carts or baskets in places like this at all. So I routinely go up when I get a bunch of stuff and drop it off. They'll give you a marker or some kind of number system. Most of them do. And they'll set it aside and give you that marker so when you come back, they know what's yours. Well, this one here actually wrapped up everything before I got back up there. I already took the tags off of it and the whole works. Wasn't something that I'm used to, but I'm fine with that. We're out of town. It was nice that it was done. I didn't have to wait any longer. The whole works. So I just took it, paid for it, and left. It was $1, so it's not some big pricey thing. It's a nice bottle if it wasn't damaged. Damage-wise, right there, and let's see how well you can see it. Right there, they chipped it after I set it up on the counter, but before they wrapped it. It's got a big chunk out of it, destroying the value of this bottle. Not only that of destroying the value, it destroyed a historical item that was handmade, hand-blown, in excellent condition when I found it. I didn't think to check it out until we got all the way home. Now, how do I know it was broken before they wrapped it? I looked at this very closely, and I have video of me picking this exact bottle out, and there's no damage. I looked at it very closely. Otherwise, I wouldn't have bought it. Even if it was only $1, it's not worth anything to me if it's damaged, because I planned on keeping this one here. So I looked at it very closely. When I took this out of the bag after we got home, there was no broken glass anywhere. None whatsoever. No crumbles, no shards. The piece that was broken off here was just gone. The only way that could have happened is if it happened before they actually wrapped it, but after I gave it to them. So that's really kind of upsetting that they didn't tell me that the item was damaged. Obviously, I don't want this to happen in the future, $1 or not. We're never again going to trust that they have taken care of the item. Before we leave the store, if they've wrapped it, I'm going to unwrap it and look at it going forward. I was pretty TO'd because I bought this 4+ hours from my house, so there's no way on earth I can bring it back. I couldn't even prove where it happened to them. They would just assume, hey, he probably broke it. He's trying to get his money back. Unfortunately, it seems it's hard to even trust people working at an antique mall over something that would have cost $1. If they broke it, big whoop, big deal to me. But the fact that they didn't tell me, cleaned up the mess, cleaned up the broken glass, wrapped it up, and sold it to me is the bothersome part. So, again, going forward, we're looking at everything so that sort of thing doesn't happen. One other time at an antique mall locally, now this was locally, they didn't put everything in the bag. They sold it to me. It showed up on my bill, but it wasn't in the bag. Thank goodness they were one that I've dealt with for many years. They found it sitting there. Somebody just forgot to put it in the bag. Now, in that case, it was local. I didn't notice it till I got home. I was just 20 minutes or so away from the place, so it wasn't a huge ordeal for me to drive back and then to fix it for me. You know, they were honest about it. They took care of it. So always verify what you purchase as well. Now, if I went to sell this bottle here, this bottle is a whiskey bottle from about 1850, 1860-ish, Civil War times. This bottle would have probably gotten us 30 or 40 bucks. But now it's not really worth much at all, other than, say, a decorator piece or something to sit on a shelf. No one's going to want to buy a bottle with a chunk off the bottom like that, especially when they're lower $30 or $40 value bottles. So anyway, pay attention to what you're buying. Look at it closely. Know the difference. Don't just buy it assuming that the tag marked on the item at a thrift store, or antique mall, flea market, whatever is correct. A large chunk of items I run into in the wild are misidentified, whether they're dated wrong, marked wrong, stated as something they're not, like a carved piece or bone item here. Again, be careful. Look into it. Understand how to tell the difference on these commoner items that you run into. Weight-wise is a big deciding factor, too. If this was bone, it would weigh a lot more than it does now. If this was carved wood out of one solid piece, and not modern that is, this would weigh a lot more. Even though it's small, it would still weigh more. This is clearly pine or something soft. This is hardwood. Most early carved figures like this are made out of hardwood. They're not going to be made out of something really light and easily broken. So anyway, that's what I have for you today. Hopefully that gave you some ideas, some thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button down below. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified if I post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell all your friends.